You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies. Hello and welcome to Affected by Altitude, the Colorado Rockies podcast on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Evan Lang, and with me, as always, wearing the same colored shirt is Skylar Timmons.
Indeed. Hello.
He's not, I should correct myself. He's not always wearing the same colored shirt. He is my co-host as always, and we are also wearing the same colored shirt.
Yes.
No, it had to be Terror Sweat.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Children who are wrong. And speaking of children, we are so tantalizingly close to baseball because at time of recording, pitchers and catchers report very, very soon. And when this episode goes up on Monday the 10th, pitchers and catchers will be reporting to the Rockies complex in Arizona within days. So pitchers and catchers report on the 13th. The full squad has to be there for the first full squad workout on the 18th. And then on the 21st, it's baseball time, baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the air, especially here in the where I'm at. Softball, college baseball is underway. I think I'm calling some softball games this coming weekend. And baseball and it's coming up. I drove by the Amish Garden Center and I saw some of the Amish children out playing baseball in the yard, which is really cool to see. So it's in the air. I can taste it.
It just makes me really curious how the Amish feel about advanced metrics. Are they purely, your core three original, your batting average, on base percentage, slugging?
I don't know.
How do they feel about OPS plus?
I do not know.
Well, fix that. No, it is weird too. It's always been weird to me how early high school and college baseball starts, because in parts of the country it is real cold still. And my closest college team, which is Colorado School of Mines, they start with like their first month of the season is mostly games in different states because it's too cold to play here.
Yeah, that's how it is for Adams State University. So
I guess I've never understood why not just follow sort of a similar schedule to Major League Baseball. But then I guess you're not done in time for the draft to happen.
Yeah.
At the All-Star break.
Yeah, so it's always weird, the weird scheduling, and it deals with just the school year itself.
That is true.
So,
man, I would kill for more college baseball in Colorado. Big program kind of stuff. It's always really bummed me out that the University of Colorado doesn't have a baseball program.
Hey, they have one now.
No, they don't.
Their club team they're trying to put together.
Oh, the club team's persistent. I'm talking a collegiate team.
Close enough.
One that could.
They're a college team.
The one that could hypothetically participate in the College World Series were they to make it to that. But fair enough. But speaking of the weather and spring training. Spring training is basically here, and so today's going to be kind of our primer into spring training for the Rockies. What to watch out for, quote unquote storylines, things like that. The Rockies are going with a full complement of 23 non-roster invitees in addition to everyone on their 40-man roster. So they've got 63 players coming into spring training right now. For big league camp, and it's just going to be really interesting to see how things sort of shake up, because there's not a ton of position battles, so to speak, but there are definitely positions to watch out for.
Yeah, I think like we've talked about, the system is the roster is pretty well set for the most part. Like 7/9 of the infield, or like 7/8 7/8 of the infield is like pretty solidified, and like the starting rotation's pretty solidified. The bullpen, it's mostly like the bullpen and right field, or just that outfield mix, is the biggest question mark. Otherwise, everything else is like, well, it's just going to be business as usual. Who's going to be on the bench? Like, not very exciting battles, but a couple of very crucial ones coming up.
I feel like even for the bench, for the most part, we kind of know who's going to be there.
Yeah.
Like honestly, the big thing for spring training this year is going to be people who are potentially going to have such a good spring that they might force their way onto the opening day 26 man when they potentially would not have been there before. Your guys like Chase Dollander or Carson Palmquist, where if they really kill it this spring, all of a sudden the Rockies have some decisions to make when it comes to their rotation. Because otherwise, like you said, the rotation's very set. First base is set, second base is set, shortstop is set, third base is set, center field is set.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, well, and part of that too is looking at the front office thinking, if a Palmquist or a Dollander actually do have a really good spring, will the team actually follow through and put them on the team in some capacity? Who knows? Because this team's so weird with everything. They'll say one thing and then do something else. So it's hard to gauge exactly what can happen. It gets hard to predict. Well, if Dollander has a really good spring, he's going to be in the rotation. Well, I don't see him really moving any of those rotation guys into a bullpen spot like they said they would. So who knows exactly, but it'll be fun to watch at least.
Yeah, and plus there's always the situation of what if somebody makes the opening day roster and then doesn't do very good?
Yeah,
You're Michael Tolia from last year, where he made the opening day roster and really struggled.
Yeah, and that's there's a whole other tangent to what we're talking about, but that's the hard part with spring training is how much stock do you put in performance in either direction, and if it'll translate, because we got several, it's like a month of games. Like they're play their first game on the 21st. So next week they're starting games, and how much stock do you put in? Because they're facing different level of competition. They're facing AAA guys, minor leaguers, random veterans trying to make a big league roster. So it's how much stock do you put in to the stats and performance, and if that'll translate over into the regular season,
especially early in spring training before they start reassigning people, because the first couple of weeks of spring training, first week or two, are mostly guys. The guys playing the most are guys that probably aren't going to make the opening day roster. They're your non-roster invites and your lower level minor league guys who are just sort of there to show off their stuff and see what their development is turning around into. Like there's guys on the 40-man roster that the Rockies are inviting to spring training, like Yanquiel Fernandez, who Yanquiel Fernandez is probably not going to make the opening day roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so then that'll burn an option for the year. So it's spring training is kind of weird when you look back and think about it, of just glorified training camps. But it's the weird transactions that have to happen with it, and the 40-man, and just all those weird little things with it. But it's a weird time. Because
it really is,
like you're saying, because a lot of those younger guys, most of spring training, you're hardly going to see your main staple guys. Like they don't play that much.
Yeah,
the main staple, like
Charlie Blackmon wouldn't really start his spring training until a couple weeks in, because they're your known quantities.
Yeah, most games are being decided by a bunch of randos from AAA and like the non-roster invite guys who are trying to make the team.
Yeah. And you look at just our non-roster invite list, and you go down this list, and half of these guys, that there is basically no chance that they are going to make the opening day roster. That Sean Sullivan, who ended his season in Hartford and had hip surgery over the offseason, probably not going to make that opening day roster. That Gabriel Hughes and Roniker Palma and Braxton Fulford, your Ryan Ritters, your Cole Carriggs, your Sterling Thompsons, and Benny Montgomerys they haven't progressed enough in their minor league careers. Most of these guys are high A or double A, that they're not going to make it to the opening day roster. This is their audition to see how close they are to eventually making their big league debut.
Yeah.
So it's really tough because you're going to see, inter squad workouts, multi-team workouts, and all of these guys who, get not insignificant playing time that are not going to be the contributors this season. And so the only guys I can think of that I think we're going to see from very early on that are probably going to be on the opening day roster is, I think Nolan Jones is going to play a lot this spring.
Yeah.
I think we see a lot of Zach Veen, and I think we see a lot of Jordan Beck.
Yeah.
Because as we discussed sort of earlier, it's the left field and right field spots that are really the only spots in the roster that aren't pretty much set at this point.
Yeah, and it always seems like it's kind of like contingent on one of these other players come like, yeah, I want to play this much today and just work on some things. So it's you'll see a lot of your regular guys, they'll start a game, they'll play a couple innings, get a couple of at bats, and then be gone by like the fifth inning or so. They'll hopefully get some balls on defense. So it's really limited playing time. But then, like you're saying, some of those other guys, fringe guys that need to maybe bounce back or really get some action going, is your Nolan Joneses that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, your guys who are notoriously slow starters should get, a decent chunk of spring training reps because they're slow starters. So the more you start getting them warmed up, the better it is. It's really similar to your starting pitchers who your rotation guys are going to get a decent amount of work in spring training just because you've got to start working on stretching them out to 4 or 5 innings before you hit opening day. But at the same time, those starting pitchers are going to start by pitching like 1 inning, 2 innings. Like nobody's going to come out and throw 6 innings to start spring training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of isn't there like that? There's like a poll or somewhere most players are like, yeah, spring training's too long. Like we play too many games before the regular season, which personally I think is true. Like you don't need a whole month of games, maybe like 2 weeks worth of games. They could definitely start spring training now, but do your inter squad stuff and don't start playing actual games until a couple weeks into the season, just so you can maybe figure out your guys a little bit more. But yeah, there's all those moving wheels of getting players ready for the season. So it's hard to like put your stock in like, oh, what do we watch in spring training? It's mostly just giving us reason to care about spring training and like watch it and follow it more closely is figuring out those battles and the key questions for some of those teams.
Well, and folks who go to spring training will tell you that some of the better parts of spring training are watching like the workouts and the throw arounds and seeing guys just sort of work on stuff versus the actual games. Like the games are fun. Everybody loves watching baseball, but I feel like you could shorten the amount of games that you have. You still started at the same time. Everybody shows up to camp at around this time of year. And I would love to see, and I know that, Skylar, you and I as lunatics who love baseball this much we would eat up. I would eat up at the very least, all that behind the scenes content of, oh, what's on today? Well, today we're going to be filming the outfielder workouts and we're going to be talking to each outfielder and doing all that stuff. I feel like part of the reason why spring training is so long still at this point is because it's a moneymaker. Spring training is really expensive to go to nowadays.
Dang old Scottsdale with their tourism, trying to make that monies. There's always a profit to be had, Evan.
There is. And it's not that I don't like the games because, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to listen to or watch every spring training game that I can because it's baseball and I love baseball. But at the same time, I can recognize, you could probably ease up off the gas a little bit in terms of how many games are going to be played.
It's
like
the
a full month of games.
It's the 8th inning. Here's random Julio Jones. And you're like,
I'm not gonna
"Who?"
lie though, that's one of my favorite parts of spring training when you're listening on the radio,
Like,
is when you get to like the 7th, 8th inning and the radio guys are desperately trying to figure out who on earth is on the field.
yeah, and that's the thing too, is it's always just like it's a media nightmare. I've That's one of my worst thing. The thing I hate the most when I'm calling a high school basketball game is, okay, I've looked at the program, I've written down the roster on my in my notebook so I know who is who and keeping track. And then they substitute a kid in who has a random jersey number that I don't have on my list.
Yeah, your spring training numbers
And I'm like, who is this?
coming
And so I'm
off the
frantically searching.
coming off the bench at shooting guard, number 87.
Mhm. Or they'll write down, the kid will have a different number. That's the number he wears on varsity, but since he's playing on JV, he's wearing that number still, but it doesn't correlate to what's in my program of the jersey he should be wearing. Oh,
Yeah.
I hate it so much.
And it always makes me laugh when you see you'll see the spring training jerseys and stuff, show up on auctions or memorabilia sites, and it's like number 92. We have no idea who wore this.
Oh goodness, but that's also
But
the charm of it.
it is, because I do like I've always liked the idea of, if when you're closer, you've made the team, you've earned your number, you've earned the name stitched onto the back of your jersey. Like, that's cool to me. But at the same time, it makes it a media and recognition nightmare of like, all right, well, who's going in right? Okay, he's wearing number 93. That doesn't help. He's a white guy. Flip through the media guy.
Yeah.
Go that guy.
Mm-hmm. I always apologize to the audience, and then I just start saying, well, I'm just going to refer to him by his numbers since I don't know his name.
It's like in a video game where they don't have the pre-recorded announcer voice for that specific combination of names.
Number 4.
It's like, now batting, the shortstop, number 4. Makes me remember it happened a lot in the older sports games. It happens less often now because there's more space to record lots of different name combinations, but you still get it. But it's like, I go back and I play a PS1 baseball game, Triple Play 2000 or something like that, and you just hear, now batting, the shortstop, and it just cuts off. And it's like, I mean, it's not untrue.
There was one year MLB The Show actually had my first name in the game. They had Skyler. They also had Timmons. And so, like, it was 1 year, and I got to hear my name called in the game. Otherwise, it's mostly always just, now batting, number 13, Timmons. I'm like, oh, man.
That's why you got to give yourself a cool nickname that they've got a pre-recorded option for. Now batting, Star Timmons. I don't know. Do you have a nickname? You ever had a nickname?
None that are in the game. Mm-hmm. That'll just be the rest of this podcast.
Dead air.
None I can say on air.
Dead air. Yeah, but it's going back to spring training, and we'll talk about it a little bit more after the break here, of really the more meaningful stuff in spring training is going to be weeks from now. It's going to be in March. It's going to be in the end of February. And it's tough to say that because, you really want to root for a lot of the guys on this team and their stories, but at the same time, you recognize the guys getting the majority of the playing time in the first week of spring training are not the guys who are going to be on the team. Yeah. But we are going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we will discuss the guys who could possibly be on the team.
What? There's
at least 9 of them. Because you have 9 people in the lineup. 10. It's 10 now. Because there's no DH. Or there is a DH. No, pitchers don't hit anymore. Man, this is great. This is some quality content right here. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Affected by Altitude with Evan and Skylar, continuing to talk about spring training. And Skylar, who do you think of everybody we know that's going to be here at spring training, who do you think has the most to prove in the spring?
I would say, man, it gets tough because I'm just running through. We've already talked about Nolan Jones, but we'll talk about him a little bit more. But I think for me, is Jordan Beck. I think is a big one. It's kind of a tie for me between Jordan Beck and Zach Veen at the moment, of two guys that really have to prove something here in spring training. And even more so, I'd lean towards Zach Veen, but Jordan Beck has to prove that he is worthy of being the starting right fielder in 2025, because that's a position, Evan, that the Rockies do not have a solid answer to as of right now. Because as much as I like Sam Hilliard, I do not want him playing every single day in right field as my starting right fielder.
We don't need another Jake Cave or Nick Martini. We don't need another Jake Cave this season.
First baseman Nick Martini.
And I want to go with Jordan Beck as well, because Jordan Beck he showed such flashes. Like, the highs were high for Jordan Beck, but the lows were low, and really not a whole lot of those creamy middles, where Jordan Beck finished the season hitting 188, 245, 276. He had a strikeout percentage of over 35%, and per Fangraphs, he had one of the lowest wins above replacement on the team at negative 1.0. And I recognize he's a rookie breaking into the big leagues. He dealt with injury, broke his hand, was out for a significant amount of time. But the thing with Jordan Beck is he needs to prove he has made adjustments and is ready to go this spring, because he is replaceable right now. And that's the thing, is other players on this team are not replaceable. Brenton Doyle is not replaceable. Ezekiel Tovar is not replaceable. Ryan McMahon is not replaceable. Like, most of your solidified starting guys have come in and proved you can't take them off of the team. You can't switch them out with somebody else. But if Jordan Beck doesn't, show that he can earn the job in spring training, why not give Zach Veen a shot? Why not give another one of these outfielders a shot? Why not shuffle things around? And it's tough because I love Jordan Beck. I think he's awesome. We love Mike Honcho, but he struggled last year, and you can't really just wash that away of, well, he's just a rookie, because we've now had 2 consecutive seasons where rookies were some of the most important players on this team.
Well, I think part of it too, and I guess this just turned into a player projection for Jordan Beck at the moment, but it's some of those guys you mentioned. Well, why were they able to establish themselves? They were given the chance to do so. And yeah, Jordan Beck was getting that opportunity, and was starting to show some signs. Like, there were inklings there, but we're waiting for him to still work through some things, because he blew through AAA so quickly. Starting there and was off to a tear. He hit 316, 395, 540 in AAA last year, or in the minors last year. Pretty good. Yeah. And had the 8 home runs, 35 ribbies, across the board, a high walk rate, league average strikeout rate. Across the board, doing well in the minors. But it's the same thing we've seen with a lot of players. They struggle when they get to the Rockies, whether it's just the Rockies are awful about helping players make that jump, or it's they don't let them try to establish themselves. Because when he gets injured, he was starting to maybe start to trickle up just a smidgen when he got injured. And then when he comes back, it's the Jake Cave show. We're hardly seeing Jordan Beck. He'll come in maybe as a late game placement. He'll get a start here and there, but it's mostly the Jake Cave show. And Sam Hilliard. Those two took up a lot more playing time. You need to give a guy like Beck or Veen, pick one. Do something with him in spring training. Pick one and let him run. Go for it. Don't dangle, well, we have Sam Hilliard that'll take over for you if you struggle. No, just let the kid take the spot, make it his own. If it's May and he's hitting 105 and has one home run, then option him and try out somebody else.
Tolia.
Yeah. No, Tolia is our first base.
Exactly what happened with Michael Tolia, where he
exactly.
made the opening day roster and he struggled out the gate and you had to option him. But then that kind of lit a fire under Tolia of, oh, I got something to prove now. And he killed it the rest of the season. And for Jordan Beck, like, he didn't have an insignificant amount of playing time. He appeared in 55 games at the big league level, but he appeared in only 39 games in AAA. And it is a more hitter-friendly environment, for sure, where he had a weighted runs created plus of 138 in 39 games in AAA and of 32 in 55 games with the Rockies. That's a really sharp drop-off and a dramatic increase in strikeouts for him. But you know who had more games than Jordan Beck? Sam Hilliard.
Yeah.
Alaris Montero, no longer with the team. And another thing is, you cannot, and I'm going to be so mad if they do this, you cannot keep throwing Hunter Goodman out there in right field occasionally. And I don't want to see Chris Bryant in right field.
Yeah. And like Jordan Beck, he played in those 54, 55 games. He started 50 of them. So when he did play, he was usually starting. And then he played through 45 complete games. So typically was getting subbed out at some point late in the game as well, probably for a pinch hitter and Jake Cave to pinch.
Yeah.
So I think some of those younger guys, but I think Jordan Beck is a big one that has to prove that he can earn that spot and make it his own, or at least be the first in a wave of young outfielders trying to jockey for one position. Because you got a lot of them. Because there's Beck, and then you got Veen. You've got Benny Montgomery, who is trying to overcome the injuries. Sterling Thompson, he's in that mix. Yanquiel Fernandez. So there's at least 5 guys right now who are jockeying for one position.
Yeah.
Plus add in Sam Hilliard, that's 6. Nick Martini, there's 7. There's other guys that can play the outfield. Like, there's a lot for really 1, maybe 2 positions.
Yeah. And for Benny Montgomery, I don't think that he's got a huge shot to make the opening day roster. The highest he's been is AA, and he's been dealing with all these injuries. For Benny, the biggest thing this spring is to show that he is fully healthy and just ready to rock. If he has a really good spring training, I can see him starting the year in AAA.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, like, there's a ton of guys that have a lot to prove that aren't even jockeying for a major league position, but are still having to prove their worth on the depth chart.
Yeah, or
like
just
Benny
prove that they are healthy. Even Gabriel Hughes needs to, I think, have a decent spring to show that it's not going to be as important numbers wise, but just to show that he's getting his stuff back as he recovers from Tommy John, because he struggled out the gate when he came back from Tommy John and went straight to the Arizona Fall League, which is a difficult place to play.
Yeah,
and that's going to be, I think, all the guys coming back from injury are always going to be guys to watch, but the 2 major ones are Benny and Gabriel Hughes.
Yeah. So there's a ton of those prospects that guys show, like, yes, I'm still worth something. I'm still valuable. I can still help this team. There's a reason you took me in the first round, even. And so that's always the interesting part too, is like the prospect battles of who's gonna move up that depth, who's jockeying for position on the depth chart. Jordan Beck shot his way up the depth chart, surpassing a bunch of guys with his performance in AAA last season, and like even going into AAA, or just going into the season last year because of his minor league season in 23. And so it's those guys battling one another for, well, who's first on the call sheet when it comes to we need somebody to fill in on the big league roster.
Yeah. And honestly, I think probably the top of the list, if Jordan Beck doesn't deliver, is probably going to be Veen. Just because he's been their top prospect for so long. A guy I'm really interested in seeing what happens this spring with is Greg Jones, because you traded for him. You traded a pitching prospect to Tampa for him last year. He only appeared in like 6 big league games with the Rockies last year, spent most of the year with AAA Albuquerque, also dealt with injuries, but he's got a lot to show of like, all right, well, we acquired you and we gave up pitching talent to do so. Are you going to be able to be a big league contributor? Or is, a quadruple A player your ceiling at this point? Because he's got some of the tools, but he still needs the refinement, and he's getting older. He's going to be 27 by the time opening day rolls around.
Yeah. He's one of those guys that's like, well, he could probably be on the chopping block on the 40 man if that way things go. But you think about Greg Jones, like, what a useful tool he could be if the Rockies would just kind of use him in some way. Like, he could be that super utility guy on the bench of a late game pinch runner. Yeah, we can get what we can out of the bat. Like, there's some stuff there.
Yeah, he's got some pop.
Like, but using him for his defensive and like running abilities. Oh, it's late in the game and somebody gets on base. Well, let's put in Greg Jones, who can swipe a bag for us.
Yeah, guy almost broke the stealing record in AAA. The Isotopes franchise stealing record, I should say, that was set by D. Strange Gordon, I think. He was pretty close to it, and he only played like 80-something games in the season. Like, he's a threat to steal. He had 46 stolen bases in 86 games with the Isotopes last year, and had some pretty considerable thunder in his bat. 16 home runs, one of the higher numbers on the Isotopes. But I mean, the guy's got an 80 grade run tool.
Yeah.
But he's now starting to get a little long in the tooth, and you traded for him, but you didn't really give him an opportunity last year. And now there's a potential for people to start passing him by on the depth chart.
Yeah. And it's just one of those baffling moves by the Rockies. Why did you get him? And then what are you going to use him for? Because we put him on the 40-man roster. Well, we traded him to fill up a spot on the roster just because we could? Because he was a former first-round pick? Did Joe Rock do something that made the team angry and they're like, we got to get rid of this guy? Like, there's so many questions with it. And I think it was part of the Rockies, like, we got to get center fielders to back up Brenton Doyle if he can't hit. And now that Doyle's like actually did good, it's kind of left them with their just sitting there like, oh, what do we do with these guys now?
Yeah. And you traded Joe Rock, who had a pretty promising season with AAA Durham last year. At age 23, he had a 4.58 ERA, pitched about 140 innings and 23 starts, 27 total appearances. He looked good. Limited the walks, had a decent number of strikeouts, was averaging basically just under a strikeout per inning. And you go, well, why did we give this guy up? First of all, the name potential alone, the Rock pitching for the Rockies, come on. But also that we gave him up for a guy that we don't even know if he's going to be a big league contributor.
Yeah. So who knows? But yeah, that fits into that guys that have to like try to prove something and force their way into the roster. It could feel like, well, it just depends on how many defensive positions they're going to try to get him to play in spring training. Like, are we only going to see Greg Jones in the outfield, or is he going to start a game at second base? Is he going to start at short, play third? Are they going to try to move him around? Because then give some competition to, say, an Aaron Schunk, in camp. It's between Greg Jones and Aaron Schunk. Jones has more of the defensive versatility to play outfield. He can play infield. That would be interesting to see a little bit more of. Even if he doesn't like play second base, if he can play that shortstop position a little more, plus the outfield, I think that would give Aaron Schunk some of that battle on the bench, if we will.
Yeah, and Schunk is going to be interesting because remember, Aaron Schunk last year picked up shortstop in spring training and played some shortstop at the big league level last year. And it's going to be tough for Schunk because they've brought in now all of this utility competition. So he is potentially facing competition from Greg Jones. They brought in Kyle Farmer as a utility. You got Owen Miller as a utility. And I feel bad for Aaron Schunk because I feel like he did everything right last year and now he could potentially see himself on the outside looking in. And
Yeah.
Shunk was what, a second, third round pick at University of Georgia. It was a high level pick.
Yeah. It's the nature of the game, I guess. That's how spring training goes. But
I'm rooting for Shunk though. I really like Aaron Shunk.
Yeah. And it's just like give a lot of these guys a fair shake and like really, I think that's what we talked about before. We go back to like the Harold Castros where they sign him on a minor league deal and then we just have the assumption like he's probably going to make the roster. So
yeah,
there's no point in like trying to root for some of these other guys because it's a foregone conclusion the way they've talked. Oh, he would be on the roster.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel as much like that with the signings of like when they acquired Owen Miller, signing Keston Hira, some of those guys, and Austin Nola. It doesn't feel as much like it's a foregone conclusion they're going to be on the roster for opening day, but it's enough to still to make you worry and like, I hope Shunk can like do enough to earn a spot on the opening day roster and not lose a spot to one of those other gritty veterans that Bud Black loves.
Because I'm sorry, Keston Hira or Nick Martini or whomever should not be on the opening day roster in any way, shape, or form unless there's like injuries that they need to fill in for. And even then, there are people who I would go to ahead of them. That's the thing, is like I cannot do another season of Harold Castro where he is still on the team at the end of the year and we are begging to stop putting him in the game and let some of the guys try and earn a chance or do something.
No, those veterans, they got to play. They got to play.
It just drives me insane. It's like, and at the same time, we signed all of these utility guys, and there was, and this is probably gonna sound stupid to some people, but if you wanted a veteran utility guy who's a known quantity at the big league level, you could have just signed Garrett Hampson back, honestly. Hampson, who now is on a minor league deal with a big league invite for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I feel like you could have just done that and not, traded for Owen Miller or picked up Keston Hira or something like that. At least the guy's a known quantity. You know what he can do. You know what positions he can play. And
that's part of it too. He's a known quantity. And that known quantity wasn't very good with your team. So he's blossomed somewhere else. So you bring in new talent just to see if you can get something new out of them. That's partly why you bring in the new guys. But at the
same time, the other guys are known quantities too. And the quantity is known to be bad. Like Keston Hira has not been good. He is not good defensively. He is not good offensively.
He's all right offensively. He hits for power.
But he strikes out a ton.
Hey, what else is new for this team?
Yeah. I don't know. I know that I am a well-documented Garrett Hampson fanboy.
There's no reason they would ever entertain bringing him back.
I just would have rather had him than the rest of this cavalcade. This is going to sound really insulting. I'm sorry. The cavalcade of mediocrity that the Rockies have brought in for camp spots this year.
Well, welcome to being the Colorado Rockies.
I'm surprised they didn't try and bring back Harold Castro.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, at least you can bringing in new talent because you never know. Like you have a pretty good idea, but there's always the slim chance that an Owen Miller just pops off. You hope he doesn't because you don't want him to. He won't. But there's always the slim chance. I mean, that's the beauty of baseball. Is somebody can always pop off and be a really helpful piece. Most likely they won't be.
So slim that they need a very hearty meal.
But you bring in the different faces just to try it out to see if there is anything there that maybe they as an organization see could be helpful or utilize. Like Jake Cave didn't have a bad year. As much as we hated him being on the team, he had a good year overall. It wasn't good enough to get a deal in the States, but it was a solid overall year.
But why couldn't Garrett Hampson have the potential to have a good year?
Because he had his chances with the Rockies and he wasn't good.
But we've brought back other players who have had their chances with the Rockies and wasn't good.
Yeah, I don't know
Like
why they brought back Sam
we
Hilliard.
brought back Tommy Doyle on a minor league deal, fresh after he spent a season with AAA Gwinnett with the Atlanta Braves, and admittedly had a pretty solid season down in AAA Gwinnett. But you know,
Tommy Doyle's always had been good in the minors. His limited amount of Rockies time was not good at the big league level, but it's pretty minuscule playing time with the Rockies. But he's that known quantity in the minors at least. But you don't know exactly what he can do full time in the big leagues, and we probably still won't. He's just that depth piece for this year, I think.
I guess. But it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. You know, we could be completely off base with half of these things. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Owen Miller does come in and just absolutely kills it in spring training. And you go, well, gee, I'd really like to have that guy on the opening day roster.
But that circles it back to, well, how much stock do you put in the spring training numbers?
Exactly.
Because who's he going up? I think wasn't it Baseball Reference has like the level of competition for their spring training stats. So like they'll put it in context of, oh, this was against a 37-year-old that's trying to make a comeback in the big leagues.
Yeah, this
who
is
pitching.
This is Haris Familia.
Yeah. This is random AA pitcher that barely is scratching the surface of his first big league camp. Oh, Chris Bryant hit a 3-run homer off of him.
Wow.
Oh, this guy's notoriously can only throw meatballs.
It's like going undefeated in the NFL preseason.
Yeah.
Oh, we went 4-0 in the preseason and then went 0-16 in the regular season.
Yeah. So it's a case-by-case basis of how much stock you take into a guy's stats. And like, it's really, how's he looking with your eyeballs? What was it bats look like? It's usually like strikeouts is the big one. Some offensive numbers you can like, but I think for me, a lot of offensive guys, it's what are they doing at the plate? They're striking out a ton. They're whiffing a ton. Like Nolan Jones did that one year. No, in 2023. That's what you're keeping an eye on.
It's why I wish more spring training games were televised, because it'd be easier to keep a closer eye on.
Hey, they are if you're the
on
Dodgers.
What people look like mechanically.
Yeah.
Of what does your swing look like? What are you doing different from last year? That kind of thing is what I want to see, and you can't see that over the radio.
Yeah. Well, it's like even in spring training too. Like, if MLB's running the broadcast and like Salt River Fields has the equipment, why not just broadcast every single game there at Salt River Fields? Home games for the Rockies, at least. And Diamondbacks can do whatever on their network too. But so, like, why aren't more of the games televised? Like, why do we get 6 games through spring training for Drew Goodman to come and broadcast a game? Like, MLB does the broadcasts.
Yeah. And you can even do the fun stuff. Like the Rockies always have in spring training, they usually have a joint broadcast between them and the Mariners broadcast crew. Do more of that. Mix it up. Have fun with it.
Well, or just patch in Jack Corrigan's play-by-play.
Sure.
Over the broadcast. That's all you need. And to like, even just have the camera up. I don't need broadcasting on it. I can do that. Just play the game with the sounds of the game.
Yeah, I'd be down.
Get your graphics people. They're just throwing up the little graphics of, oh, this is who this is.
Yeah, you don't even need like the fancy stuff. I just need like a name. Who is this? And then your regular score bug.
Yeah. Give me the sounds of the game. I just want to watch it. Because why do the Dodgers and the Yankees get to see every single spring training game?
Because they're
dirt bags. That's like the disparity of the spring training games. Like, who gets to watch how many? Like, oh, Rockies fans, you get 6 that you can watch. You can listen to a lot more. But then even that's a hassle, because then you have to buy MLB Game Day and
purchase a radio.
Well, even then, like,
gather round, children, around the talking box.
Well, yeah, if you live in the Denver area, you can just pull up the iHeartRadio app and get it. But I can't do that. I have to pay for iHeartRadio to be able to do that down here, because the local radio stations don't do spring training, don't broadcast the spring training games. Regular season, I'll get them on the radio, but
But that's spring training. We're going to take one more
Mhm.
quick break, and when we come back, it is time for another player projection. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Mojo Nojo.
Welcome back to Affected by Altitude. Final segment here with Evan and Skylar. We're going to do one more player projection as we keep rolling towards opening day. And we've already alluded to who we were going to talk about. We've already even talked about him a little bit. On the evaluation block today is one Mr. Nolan Jones, who is going to be, he's the presumptive starting left fielder for the Rockies here in 2025, but also has probably the most to prove of any presumptive starter coming into this season other than Chris Bryant. But whereas for Chris Bryant, like we talked about last week, our expectations for him are so low, the expectations for Nojo, I think, are a lot higher because we've seen what he can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been a mixed bag. We've had a really good season and a really bad season. One that was a healthy season, one that was an injury-marred season, and so you're hoping he can go back that 2023 wasn't a fluke, and that he just got into his head too much last season, then the injuries, and then just extra stuff off the field he was dealing with. You're hoping that he can put all that behind him, that's not who he is as a player, and that 2023 is closer to who he actually is. Because Evan, across the board, he struggled offensively and defensively. Because last year, 227 average, 321 on base, 320 slugging, power was way down. Had 3 home runs in 79 games. So half a season had 3 home runs. He played 106 games in 23, had 20 home runs. So it just across the board, he struggled to get on base. He struck out way too much. Not a bad ratio. 91 strikeouts to 36 walks last season. Not terrible, but he just wasn't doing anything with the bat.
And I feel like it's not only injuries, it was a confidence thing. You could tell even early on in the season that he was kind of rattled because his defense was bad, where he went from one of the best outfielders in the league statistically in 2023, where the only reason he wasn't in consideration for a Gold Glove was because he just barely missed the innings requirement, to really struggling. And you look at his defensive metrics in left field, 2023, 9 defensive runs saved. 2024, -4. 2023 ultimate zone rating of 6. In 2024, -4.5. In 2023, his ultimate zone rating per 150, 14.2. That's excellent. 2024, -9.7.
Yeah.
That's rough.
His fielding run value, 6 in 2023 in left field, -4 in 24. So just across the board, outs above average, -6. Just across the board went down. Arm was still decent, but even then, a 4.9 in 23, 0.3 in 24. So his range was down. The errors were up. Misplaying balls. He was having balls hit in the palm of his hand in the glove and not squeezing them, and they'd pop out.
Or he'd miss it. Like he'd have difficulties with his route running or his glove placement. It was rough. It was rough to watch. And that was kind of, especially in that first few series, that was kind of your first indicator of something ain't right.
Yeah. Drops that fly ball in Arizona in the first series, ends up resulting in the Rockies losing that game. And then, like the very next day in Chicago, that ball out into left field, he comes to scoop up, it gets past him, turns into a little league home run inside the Parker. And he had 2 errors on that because his throw back into the field was offline.
Yeah. And then you combine that with the hitting, and it was like watching a completely different player. And we know that we had the injuries. He was having back issues. He was having he had some knee issues, and then the off the field stuff, the health of his his daughter and all of that stuff, his confidence. It was one of the first times I've seen in a while where when he was sent on his second rehab assignment, they sent him all the way down to low A Fresno, which is usually what you do with pitchers to slowly start building them back up. But of just, this guy needs a confidence booster, and maybe getting some swings against some kids down in Fresno can help him get that back.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, part of it, like we talked about, was the self-imposed. He put a lot of pressure on himself coming into the season. Here's a fourth place rookie of the year, and they were kind of getting touted as the face of the franchise now. It was their most valuable player in 23. So added pressure. He's front and center at Rockies Fest. He's, a lot of the messaging, promotions, he's getting the spotlight on him as here's this top prospect that didn't pan out with Cleveland, gets sent over to the Rockies, and he proves himself, has a 2020 season, has a historical season defensively, all this kind of thing. It's only naturally probably was feeling the pressure of like, I got to deliver, I got to be a leader for this team. And he puts that on him, and he suffers for it, physically and mentally in the game. And, I had written about this and talked about this. He was, like you said, he was a completely different player in 24 at the plate, because in 2023, what was he often going to swing at, Evan, and do some damage on? The first pitch of the at-bat. 24, he became a lot more selective and like a little bit more passive at the plate.
He struck out looking a lot.
Yeah, and like I remember doing a deep dive into that of like what's going on with him. And he's not really doing anything differently. He's still swinging at pitches, and like numbers are pretty lined up, but it's where is he swinging at? What's he watching? It's pitches on the outside corner. He was having trouble seeing the outside corner, tracking balls out there, and so he was getting rung up. And like umpires were kind of hosing him on some stuff quite a bit, but his zone awareness was still good. He was being patient. He was laying off some pitches, but that also took away his great tool, which was being an aggressive first pitch hitter. And like we saw, a 12.1 walk percentage, that's not bad. That's really good. But the 30% strikeout rate last season, that was awful, because then he wasn't doing the damage when he was making contact. Because 23, he had a 29.7% strikeout rate. Okay. And he was doing the damage when he would make contact. He wasn't doing that last season.
Yeah, that was the big thing. It's like his strikeout percentage wasn't significantly higher, I would say, than last year, and his walk percentage wasn't significantly lower. And on its face, there is nothing wrong with being more selective.
Yeah,
if it delivers results. And for Nolan Jones, it just really didn't. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see what 2025 brings for him, because we'll go ahead and just roll into the projections here. Fangraphs, all of their projections do have Nojo bouncing back at least somewhat. Not to, 2023 levels, but definitely an improved hitter, where they have him with around an 11.8 walk rate and a 29.3 strikeout rate in all three projections. Okay, that's pretty solid. And then FGDC and Streamer have him. All three projections on Fangraphs actually have different numbers for him, which is really interesting. You have batting averages 255, 250, and 261. On base percentages 348, 344, and 353. Slugging 428, 423, and 434. Zips, as usual, is the kindest to him, but in general, it has him around 15 home runs, around 50 to 60 RBIs, and 10 or so stolen bases. And that's all pretty solid. But yeah, I would love to see Nolan surpass those projections, because we've been tantalized by what he can do. A 3.8 F4 season in 2023. And, they have him projected as maxing out at around 1.8, 1.9 wins above replacement per Fangraphs. And that would be a solid bounce back season for him compared to last year. But we know he is capable of more.
Yeah, and I think a big key of it is hoping that his back is healthy, because I think that was something that was even bothering him. The injuries were bothering him in spring training, and then it finally came to a head as that first bit of the season went on. So you can see that where the back injury in the back especially hindered him, because his hard hit rate last season 33%, Evan. That's down
Oof.
from 40% in 23. Like he was just kind of medium speed hits, went up to 53%. That was the highest of his career thus far in the big leagues, up from 45 last season. And so, he was hit basically just pretty average, not doing a lot of damage. Those are like your slap singles. Solid hits, but they're not doing a whole lot. And
And
so,
that was the thing in 2023 is when Nolan got a hold of the ball. Oh,
yeah.
he punished that thing. Like he was ripping, just screaming home runs, and didn't really do that last year. The minimal home runs, but when he hit a home run, it wasn't, I feel like, that particularly hard hit.
And we can draw that parallel with Chris Bryant, where the back injuries sap so much from a hitter because you can't get the right torque on the swing to generate power and generate bat speed. And so that results in a lower hard hit rate. When you do get a home run, it's pretty much a wall scraper. It's barely getting over. It's enough. A home run's a home run, but the ball's just not being struck particularly hard.
Yeah, because hitting is a full body thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, your hands and your arms and your arm strength is important, but so is your hip rotation, your back rotation, your ability, like you said, to generate torque.
Power is from the lower half. It doesn't really matter with your arm, how big and beefy your arms are. Like it helps, and like bat speed, but all that is contingent on your lower half able to generate torque and speed and power and movement. And when your back is injured, your knee is injured, you're hindered, and so you're losing. Your power gets cut in half almost.
Yeah, like you can be super jacked, but if your back and your hips and your everything else aren't working, you're SpongeBob wearing anchor arms.
Yeah, pretty much. And so I think can be a lot of Jones's struggles can be chalked up to that aspect of the injuries really hit him. Because like we're saying, you can look across the board and there's a lot of stats like, okay, that's pretty similar to last season or to 2023. It's so many things, but then you look at it's just aspects of hitting that really start to hurt him. Where he wasn't barreling balls up, a 5.9% barrel percentage last season compared to a 15.7. Like the hard hit percentage was up to like 44% last season, according to Fangraphs and Statcast, the hard hit rate. But he wasn't barreling them up.
What it makes me wonder is, so like we watched him trying to be more selective. If him being more selective of the pitches was more him going, I don't think I can get to that with my physical limitations. Like I literally cannot get to that pitch.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Yeah, because the 33%, that's a hard percentage. It's balls that were classified as hit with hard speed, but then the hard hit rate over on Statcast, it's just he wasn't barreling up balls. He couldn't square them up exactly like you're saying. So it could be, maybe the bat's a little slower. I could even look those up, but there's so many the peripherals and like the deeper things about Nolan Jones is what led to his problems. And a lot of it can be traced back like, well, his body just was not in the shape it needed to be because of the injuries to perform and try to replicate the 2023 season.
Yeah. And I think ultimately our expectations for Nolan Jones are going to be like, I don't expect him to be taking home MVP votes or something like that. I don't think that's a realistic expectation. But I think the realistic expectation for Nolan is to be healthy, first of all, and to get some of these numbers back up to where they were. You need to increase that hard hit percentage, need to increase your power numbers and at least get somewhat back up to where we know he can be. And it's not going to be an all at once thing. You know, he is a little bit of a slow starter. And I think that's why he's going to need, like I said earlier, more reps in spring training than I think a lot of the other presumptive starters are going to get, because they need to get him warmed up, make sure he is in shape and healthy and ready to go.
Yeah. And like those projections you see on Fangraphs, I think those are reasonable projections to go for. No, 14 to 16 home runs. That's a good range. I'd like to see him have more stolen bases, but a strong walk rate still. The batting average around 250 to 260. I can live with that. Like, that's not terrible.
Yeah.
If he can up some of those numbers. But across the board, there's so many things. We'd like to see him improve his defense. Like, we know he can. I think he's still trying to learn the position a little bit.
Yeah, because he came up as a third baseman.
Yeah. And still learning Coors Field. He's kind of learning it by fire. He needs to improve that more, because, Evan, those projections over at Baseball Reference, not as kind. They're kind of in line. 12 home runs. But they have him striking out 108 times, 11 stolen bases, 44 walks. So kind of in line with that, but we just need him to live up to those projections. Like, we don't need you to light the world on fire. Like, you can take that pressure off yourself, Nolan. We don't expect you to save this team. Just contribute the way you know you can, and that helps the team.
Yeah, because looking back, one of the things that made that 2023 season, it was a 100-loss season, one of the things that made that bearable was you had the duo of Brenton Doyle and Nolan Jones just being a really fun, spectacular outfielding pair to watch, and then come in and have them be fun to watch at the plate as well. And we know Nolan's got a 2020 season in him. He's already got one. And Brenton Doyle, we know, has got 2020 seasons in him. And can you imagine having multiple guys with 2020 seasons all on the same team? Like, that's fun.
Yeah.
And it's not going to save this team. It's not going to make this team a playoff contender immediately, because there are so many other problems to fix. But just having even a part of that Nolan Jones back, that 2023 Nolan Jones back, even a little bit, is going to make this season a heck of a lot more fun to watch. And it's probably going to be a heck of a lot more fun to play for Nolan.
Yeah.
Because he was not having fun last year.
Nobody was. Yeah, we need him to be Nolan Jones and don't become Chris Bryant on the field. Like, that's the expectation. Be Nolan Jones, not the other guy.
Be present.
Yeah, because if he performs, and that also can do one of two things. It can either shore up a position and answer a question for the Rockies of, okay, maybe then we can trade off some of these outfielders to try and get something to help the team, get a pitcher or something. Or it's, well, Nolan Jones isn't working out. We can plug in one of these out. We can plug in Jordan Beck more often. We can plug in a Zach Veen more often.
Yeah.
It's do or die time, baby.
There's competition. But that's going to do it here for us on Affected by Altitude this week. Thank you so much for listening in. When next we record, pitchers and catchers will have met, which is going to be real fun. Really curious to see if the Rockies make any other roster moves as we get towards the regular season, if they've got any trades in them, if they've got any, free agents or anything that they're going to do. I feel like they've probably got at least one move in them. I don't know what it's going to be, because they've made last minute moves several times over the last few years in spring training. So it's something we're definitely going to keep an eye on as we gear up towards baseball being back, baby. But Skylar, where can the folks find you at?
Find me over on the Twitters at Skylar Timmons, and then over at Blue Sky, stimmons13.bsky.social. And then find me over at purpleroad.com, writing Wednesday Rock Piles, and over at fansfirstsports.com, writing stuff. I'll have more Rockies stuff to write about since the season's starting.
Yay! And you can find me over on Blue Sky at EvanLang27. You can also find me over on Purple Road writing the Monday Rock Piles and getting the Pebble Report back up into gear, which will be on a weekly basis once the minor league season starts. But you're going to start seeing more of those. Last week, I discussed the non-pitcher invites to spring training. You can also catch Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite podcasting platforms of choice, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the works on that. You can also find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on social media, including youtube.com under the handle at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. That's going to do it here for us on another fine edition of Affected by Altitude. We will catch you next time. And Skyler, hit him with it, please.
Fare thee well.
Oh, it's ye olden times now.
This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.